Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me, as always, is the fighter that is Jennifer Woolman.
I feel like I should have Rocky music on behind me. Hello, everybody.
We're ready. I love it.
Why fighter?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because today we're going to talk about, what perhaps could be one of the major advocacy wins in the history of the state of Florida. And, we played a small part in this legislative win, and it's the result of many, many years of going to Tallahassee, meeting with state representatives and senators, and having those important conversations in the halls of Florida realtors about the business rent tax. And, I think it takes a special kind of fighter to stay with a topic for over a decade, which is really, when you look at the history of the business rent tax, right? 13 years to address something that was an anomaly among most states, something that was very unique to Florida, with the exception of a few counties here and there in the country, and that is the business rent tax. And so, I thought we would go through a bit of this history, ending with what just happened, over the course of the last 2 weeks, which really has been monumental, but a long time in the making. So I thought first to give people a little bit of a history. What is the business rent tax? It is a tax on commercial leases. And it is something that was a part of our state of Florida laws since 1969. And unique among U.S. states because we were, the only state to have this tax. Many of our listeners already know Florida is rightfully so and enjoys a reputation for being a very business-friendly state. We don't have a state income tax, for example. And it's funny enough because we are recording this after the Florida Panthers have won, back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, which is just amazing after last year being our inaugural Stanley Cup and to have back-to-back. It's such an amazing team. But it's funny, during the celebrations, one of the players mentioned that as a way of criticism, there were people in other states that were saying, well, the Florida Panthers are winning because Florida has no state income tax. Right. And it has to do with how that plays a role in the negotiations with players when they're deciding between playing in Florida versus playing elsewhere.
Like
and
New York.
So it's kind of an interesting thing that is a topic. That's of, funny. That was supposed to be like a slight.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't hear that
and this
piece.
player.
I love that. I love that it tied into the Panthers.
It's phenomenal. Win. But we still had this tax, which really affected small business owners who, had to carry the burden of this tax. And to give you the monumental effect of this generated about $2.5 billion to the general funds of Florida. Part of the issue is that there was no additional benefit that you get out of this tax, right? When you pay taxes for roads, you get roads. Right? You get taxes for transportation. You get a transportation infrastructure. Those of us that, for years have paid these commercial real estate tax on commercial leases, there was no additional benefit to the taxpayer for that tax, other than it was a tax that had been there since 1969. As you guys know, we human beings are very good at, well, we do this. Why do we do it? Well, we do it because we've always done it, right? And sometimes people don't remember.
Well, and it was, a lot of us considered it double taxation because we were already paying, the landlord already pays property taxes on the property. And now you're paying an additional tax because even though the tenant paid the rent, the landlord had to paid the rent tax, the landlord had to file it every year. Right. And we're like, well, wait a minute, you're already paying property taxes on it. And now they're in addition taxing the tenant for using the space.
Correct. Absolutely. And part of it is now that the landlord had the responsibility of collecting that tax and remitting it to the state. So it's an additional cost to have people in their accounting departments having to do that. And if you're a mom and pop landlord, then that was another task that you had to do. This was a topic that came out of South Florida, it came out of Miami, and it was brought to the attention of Florida realtors by and large, largest state association in the country and largest trade group in Florida with over 230,000 members.
Wait, I want to give a shout out to Ed Redlick because Ed Redlick was the president of the Miami Commercial Board at the time, and he's the one who was super frustrated with the tax and brought it up, and then it was presented to Florida realtors and brought up. And
No, kudos to Ed for sure. And another aspect of this that is really interesting is that you had the infrastructure in place with Florida Realtors advocacy arm and the very advocacy efforts locally and statewide that basically led to, at least the beginning of the conversation with the state, which again happened for 13 years. And if you really think back, it took about 5-6 years to even get the first reduction of the business rent tax. And I have here a little bit of the timeline here. It wasn't until 2017 where the state began a gradual decrease from 6%. Now, imagine what it is that was being asked of our state legislature. What was being asked was to basically stop taking in funds that were going to to general revenue, which would allow them to utilize it for any projects that the state was involved in that they saw fit. To ask a legislature to forego of that revenue is a big ask. And so as you could imagine, the first reduction was basically like a proof of concept because the argument is, look, that money is going to get reinvested in the state of Florida. Small business owners are going to use that money for other things that are going to grow their business, right? And so it will come back and perhaps multiply. Right. So the first reduction was only 0.2%. It went from statewide 6% to 5.8%. And I remember at the time, and then we should say that there are municipalities within the state that also would charge a surtax. Like in Miami-Dade County, there was an extra 1%. So if you had a business in Miami-Dade County leasing a space, then you were going to pay 7%. Basically, that would go to, in total, 1% would go to the county, 6% would go to the state. So now it gets reduced by 5.8%. And I remember, I don't know if you had the same issue, but some of my clients were like, oh my God, it's so annoying for that 0.2%, the accounting. I have to change all my accounting records.
And I have to change
it became
billing.
all of this. Yeah. And I just kept saying, listen, this is a proof of concept. This is really, think about just that 0.2%, what it signifies. It signifies that they're willing to listen, they're moving in the right direction, and, you cannot let progress be the enemy, or perfection be the enemy of progress. Then it drops to 5.5%. And for years, it kind of stays there, even though year after year, Florida Realtors, as part of their talking points when they would go for Great American Realtor Days in Tallahassee, the business rent tax was always one of the issues that was discussed. In 2023, we see the big first reduction from 5.5% to 4.5%. That's a big 1% reduction, right? Significant in its size. And then, before then, remember, we go through the pandemic in 2022. There was really not a lot that was happening. And we felt that because of the effects of the pandemic in 2023, that we weren't going to get a lot of a further reduction. What I found really interesting here, and again, kudos to the advocacy team for coming up with a creative solution was that at the time, what the state wanted to do was to replenish the unemployment trust fund that had been utilized to a higher level than ever during the pandemic. And as you may or may not remember, independent contractors were included and had the ability to claim unemployment benefits as a result, again, of the advocacy efforts of Florida realtors who wanted to make sure that not only those that were employed as W-2, but those that were 1099 employees, independent contractors, right, which make up, the majority of real estate agents and members, that they also had access to the unemployment benefits. So the idea was that there would be a reduction from 4.5% all the way to 2% once that unemployment trust fund was replenished. The unemployment trust fund gets replenished with through the business activities and the taxes that you pay to the state for those business activities. And so that got actually, I think that there was an expectation that was going to be a longer time for that to happen, right. But it happened in record time. It happened faster than they were expecting. And by June 1st of 2024 of last year, that, business rent tax gets reduced from 4.5% to 2%, which brings us to what just happened today, which is that the Florida legislature in June 16th of this year approved House Bill 7031, eliminating all sales taxes on commercial leases, more importantly, preempting local municipalities from also charging that local surtax. So effective October 1st of this year, there will be no business rent tax on commercial leases from this day forward, which is an incredible win. It represents $900 million, just that 2% reduction. We're not even counting that 1% surtax in some counties, right? Because it's not statewide. And again, in total, over the course of a 13-year, advocacy campaign, and we always say advocacy is a contact sport. We have successfully been able to basically put $2.5 billion back in the pockets of small business owners so that they can utilize it to grow their business.
And back into the Florida economy.
And back into the Florida.
It flows a lot more in the Florida economy than it does from general revenue. And
that is so true.
One of the things that made this possible, and one of the arguments that Florida realtors made when the legislators were pushing back on the amount of money that they'd be giving up, was the Supreme Court case of South Dakota versus Wayfair Inc., which was decided in June of 2018, which basically overturned the physical presence rule that had prevented states from requiring businesses without a physical presence to collect and remit sales tax to states. So basically, anything that was an online purchase wasn't subject to sales tax, and this overturned that, which allowed the state of Florida and all the other states to collect sales tax on internet-based sales. So that helped to, my guess is probably more than offset the income that was coming in. And so what does all of this mean for you? If you're a tenant rep, you need to reach out to all your tenants and have them check their statements starting October 1st to make sure that rent tax is eliminated from their invoices. If you're a landlord rep, let them know that this has been repealed, that after the 1st of October, they don't need to be collecting it.
Yeah,
they don't need to be doing any more remittance after then.
Yeah, and it's one thing that even though those that were carrying that cost were the tenants, the reality is that it positively affects not only the tenants but also the landlords. And from on the tenant side, well, obviously now you're reducing your cost, right, of the spaces that you lease out. Remember that commercial tenants lease out for 5, 10, 15 years. When they have options to renew, they might have control of one space. They may have been in that space, and they might have a commitment for the next 7, 8 years that now you have a reduction in that cost, which is significant. They can redirect that tax savings to business growth, to buying equipment, to operations, which is why, to Jennifer's point, this goes back into the Florida economy and it allows them to grow their business. It also gives you negotiating power, right, when it comes to lease renewals and relocations, because again, that's a cost that the landlord is happy to not have because it never went into their pocket. That was a cost of doing business for them, because now the landlord gets a competitive edge, right? They can get the market properties with this genuine tax savings immediately, right? Everything is a little bit cheaper. Right. That even without changing their base rent, it gives them an opportunity to retain tenants, and it makes their properties more attractive with a lower total occupancy cost. And there's a cost savings, right? A cost savings to operational expenses, right? As I was mentioning, the landlords had to collect, and the larger the landlord, especially institutional landlord, we're talking about millions of dollars that they had to process and they had to remit to the state, and
the paperwork,
and they had to, right, and if they had to collect and they had to do all those things. So again, it's an incredible ability to now redirect those efforts from those employees to do other things that are much more productive to the bottom line of their business. So, I would say this is definitely a day to celebrate, as we have celebrated a lot of great things for businesses in the state of Florida. It's why we are so bullish again on the business growth and future of Florida and South Florida, and why we definitely commend the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that year over year go to Great American Realtor Days, the staff, advocacy staff at our local association and our state association, and all the local associations around the state that also bring their staff to go out and advocate and present this in front of senators and reps and have those important conversations about how this was affecting small businesses and how it was a tax without any related benefit to those that were being taxed. And I
think it's really important to point out the effectiveness of the realtor political action, what we call the Realtor Party, which is our PAC. And, I can't tell you enough how important it is to donate. And, people say it's a donation. It's not a donation. It's an investment in your profession, in private property rights. It is an investment for everything that we believe in, and it gives us a seat at the table. We don't always win 100% of what we go after, but we're able to have a seat at the table. So at least we can taper issues that come up where we don't win, or we can have a seat at the table for 13 years straight running, where, we were always listened to, we were always heard. So please, consider investing in your profession. I think, as little as $20 is good, but if you can, and you can step up to major investor status, that is usually $1,000 a year more, and there's so many benefits. And when you look over everything that we get out of the associations, advocacy teams, and this is both on a local, state, and three-way, local, state, and national level. It's incredible. They look after every single thing that affects not only our profession, but private property rights, the environment, business ownership, etc. And they just keep track of all of these running issues, and to inform us if something that could harm our profession or anything that we believe in is on the table, get opinions, they collect stories, and if there's something that we need addressed, such as the business rent tax, they help gather information. We interview, we tell our stories every time we go up to Tallahassee or to DC, where Fernando just was. So please, I'm going to get off my soapbox, but please consider that investment. It's minor compared to what we get back. And in my personal and professional opinion, it is the biggest benefit of being a member of the association.
No, without a doubt. And I would say that our advocacy efforts as Florida Realtors are the envy of many. You know, we do more to positively impact the lives of the people that we serve, our neighborhoods, the growth and development of our communities than any other industry. We support our schools, our local businesses. We promote home ownership. We protect property ownership rights, support equal opportunities and fairness for all while being a strong, economic engine of our society. And there's a legacy to be had here. And you could be part of that legacy by investing in RPACT. And I will say that, both Jennifer and I are major investors. And again, to get out off the soapbox, but what I will relate it to is that I get a lot of questions about what is the ROI on investing your time, volunteering your time with our local, state, and national association of realtors. And the reality is that it is a huge investment. Money you could always make, but that time commitment is finite, right? And so, but what I will say is that if you're thinking about something bigger than yourself, if you're looking for an industry that is viable and strong for many, many years to come, there is no other choice than to make that investment. So it's very easy to see the return on investment of all of that time over the last 13 years on days like today, on times like today, when you see the effects. But just like that, there have been so many advocacy wins over the years that have impacted the people that we serve in a very, very positive way. And it cannot be done single-handedly. You can't just do it as one. Is when the collective voice of over 230,000 people are heard in the state capitol. And I would say that if you're looking for longevity in this business and in this industry, then you have to make that investment one way or the other. So
thank you to all of you listeners who are already major investors. We know a lot of you are. And for those of you who do take the time to go up to Tallahassee or to go to your local city council meetings when ordinances are being heard and speaking on behalf of local realtors and property owners. So thank you.
And thank you, Jennifer.
Advocating.
Yeah. And thank you, Jennifer, and for all of you out there for being fighters for the things that are right and important for us to address. Thank you all for listening.
Till next time.
Bye.